Welcome. I'm Faye Waterman and this is Talking All Things Business. And today my guest is Jackie Brahman. And Jackie is a solicitor and she is going to be talking about today how to resolve a dispute in a healthy way. Now, thank you, Jackie, for your time. This is a really important conversation to have so that people understand that you can resolve a dispute in a healthy way without all the other stuff getting in the way. How do we do that?
That's probably the hardest question, isn't it? But I suppose I'm going to give you some tips and guidance about how to do that. Look, conflict, we need to understand, is something that happens often and to everyone and quite regularly, in fact, right? It's just the different levels of conflict to where we let them escalate or whether we don't. So I generally think that people don't have great conflict resolution skills at all. We have a lot of difficulty having those hard conversations. I think sometimes women in particular, because we are raised to please people and keep people happy and to keep everyone happy around us. So we tend to maybe brush things under the carpet for way too long, potentially. So there's something in us that we're not happy about that people don't know about for a long time. And the other thing I suppose to express is what not to do if you don't want it to escalate. People don't have a really good understanding of what lawyers do often. And lawyers aren't great at resolving and de-escalating a conflict, okay? So you really don't want to go to a lawyer until you get to a certain point that is not resolvable in other ways. There's plenty of other ways to resolve a dispute, and that's what I want people to be able to explore. So lawyers, surprisingly, we're not actually trained in a lot of broad conflict resolution or to de-escalate. We tell you your legal rights. We start positioning you and deepening your position as to you've got to fight for your right. This is your position. This is where you should be. And it really sets the parties so far apart quite often that all you end up having is some kind of horse trading or bargaining to get to the middle point, which is not good negotiation at all. It serves a purpose sometimes, and some people get to that point and it has to be done in certain situations, but the majority of things, let's bring it down and let's do things so that people actually recover relationships and get something they want.
Okay, so how high emotion impacts the ability to make decisions and therefore negotiate or resolve anything? What is it? How can we, as an individual who's searching for a lawyer, remove that emotion and look at what the actual issue is? And when we were talking earlier before we came on, you said that high emotion shows not being intelligent.
Low intelligence. In the moment. Yeah. So I like people to, it's an easy way of remembering that when I am in high emotion, my brain is not working. High emotion, low intelligence, right? So it's only in that particular moment. And we're getting so much more research out about the brain and about how stress absolutely triggers, and the front of our brain just pretty much doesn't work, and we revert back into a more primal state. And there's a lot of research that it takes 20 to 30 minutes to even recover from that stress or trigger to even bring the brain back down, let alone if it's an ongoing high emotional dispute that you've got. I suppose a couple of things. You talked about, well, how do you find a lawyer that's going to help you through that? So it's a whole nother question, and it's a huge thing. You need how to find someone who understands this and helps and supports you through it. But also to be aware that this is how you get in these situations, and having some of your own little techniques to bring your brain back into functioning so you can make decisions. But the other thing to be aware of, particularly when you're working with a lawyer, is not to make decisions when you're feeling particularly stressed and they're pressuring you to make a decision at that time.
And they will pressure you, won't they? to
That's
make a
right.
decision
That's
because
right.
that's what they do.
Yep. And sometimes it does need to happen in a timely manner because there are, timeframes within a litigation proceeding, for example. But you can manage it better for yourself and know how much time you've got coming before then to be able to work with your lawyer to go through the options instead of being on the spot all of a sudden and having to make a decision on the spot. So another thing that doesn't happen very well and lawyers don't manage well is in a litigation matter, there is often a mediation, a compulsory mediation point. It's my view that these mediations at this point could be done far better than they are because it's usually a single day and people are highly stressed. They've already been positioned by their lawyers so far apart. And then in one day, there's so much pressure from their lawyers applied on them to try and resolve things and compromise and bring things to the middle. That 8 to 12 hours is such a high stress situation that people often make a decision just to get out of the situation and they don't actually make a good decision. And then within the next day or so, they regret what they've done.
Yes, and that is kind of unfair, but also on the other side of that, the people that are going into the mediation, not the lawyers, the two people that need to mediate, need to take the responsibility of doing their own research, understanding what they're actually in there for. And I can say this, but it's not an easy thing to do. Remove the emotion from it so that you have that intelligence to look at the issue and say, because there's so much emotion involved in it, you need to remove it. Easier said than done.
That's right.
To understand why you're there, what's the outcome or the result that you're looking for, how you're going to get it in a way that is amicable, and a lot of the time that doesn't happen, and a way that everyone is in a win-win situation and you walk out of there with no emotion, satisfaction, both the lawyer and you and the other side as well.
Yeah.
Doesn't like that, does it?
No, not by the time it gets into litigation because the parties end up so entrenched and realistically the lawyers have fueled their emotional states. So it is really difficult for someone then to start bringing it back and managing it for themselves. That's why I think that early dispute resolution's far better than going straight to a lawyer, and hopefully a lawyer that can help you through an alternative process is a better way of doing it too. So you want to look at early stage mediation, not a lawyer's compulsory late stage mediation.
How do you get to that early stage before it goes too far? How do you know?
Well, instead of going and finding a lawyer, go and find a mediator. Or
find a good mediator.
Yeah. How do you find a good mediator? Well, there's lots of nationally accredited mediators, so that's a great place to start. There are actually a lot of lawyers who have mediation training. So perhaps you look for a lawyer with mediation training to be the mediator rather than to represent you. So the lawyer comes, yes, they've got the legal knowledge, so they can give you a little bit of advice about what would happen after and what your respective positions may be if you can't resolve it there, which is more than a mediator can do who's come from a counselling or teaching background. So a mediator who has a legal background can maybe offer a little bit more in that situation, but they're still independently trying to resolve something for you before it gets any worse. Yeah, and there's other dispute resolution processes. I mean, there's actually a lot of free services. There's ombudsmans, there's dispute settlement centres, there's your consumer affairs. So there's all these places that help in smaller dispute processes. And there's also collaborative practice as well, which is what I'm trained in, which is a bigger team version of a mediation.
Okay, I'm also going to ask, what's the difference between conflict and abusive control?
It's a hard one. I think that over the next few years, it's certainly going to be highlighted more in Australia. There's been more advance in other countries than there has in Australia about recognising the difference. With all the publicity that is around about domestic violence lately, particularly, I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding sometimes of what it can be. Yes, there is a lot of domestic violence out there. However, there are a lot of circumstances which is really just prolonged conflict, which is not actually an abusive control situation. You're in conflict, and no one likes to be in conflict. So yes, it's really emotional. And yes, you're hurting each other emotionally, but it's only because you're in that conflict. It's not that the relationship has been defined by an abusive control situation for the whole of the time. With conflict, the main difference is that people can be future focused with conflict. They can have some empathy for each other, and they do actually want to be able to move forward from it. Whereas an abusive control situation is rigid, past focused. It's always about what has happened, not about them moving forward. And it's about continuing that control as it has always been in the past. So very different sort of situations.
We could have a whole conversation on that as well.
Yeah.
So when conflict escalates and you're working with a lawyer, or you've been through mediation and you're working with a lawyer to stop the escalation, how do you do that? What is the responsibility? And I'll come back to that often, because I think that we as individuals have a responsibility not to just rely on the lawyer to do all the work.
Yeah.
So we need to go in prepared and have an understanding of, what the conflict's all about, how we can resolve it, or if we can't, then someone else comes in and talks you through that. You go away and process it and come back.
Yep. I love that you're raising this, because it is what early stage mediation and collaborative practice is about. It's about the parties keeping responsibility for what has been created and taking responsibility for the outcome. Yes, you have a professional that facilitates you through that, because it is what early stage mediation and collaborative practice is about. It's about the parties keeping responsibility for what has been created and taking responsibility for the outcome. Yes, you have a professional that facilitates you through that, but ultimately the responsibility lies with the parties, and they keep control. Lawyers are designed to take over your problem and to work out what is best for you and to take over essentially. But that's not what a lot of people need or want. They want someone who will work with them, and they still want to be able to control the outcome. If you go with a lawyer through litigation, the outcome is out of your control, completely out of your control. At the worst possible scenario, a third party is going to decide the outcome for you. And not only that, but also the lawyer has set you up and pretty much told you what your outcome should be. So it's not necessarily even what you want. I think a lot of people don't even stop to think, what does my future look like after this, and what is an ideal outcome or an outcome that I can live with? I don't think that those options are often explored enough, or people take the time to think what my actual objective is here. Like, what percentage can I get, which is what your lawyer will set you up with. It is what is the person that I want to come out of this as? How much integrity will I still have? How much emotionally drained will I be? And how much do I actually need to move forward and start again?
Yeah, and it is a responsibility of the person who is employing that legal service to know what they want, and be realistic and reasonable about it, not go for the jugular all the time where you do see those sorts of things happening. It's the realistic issues of looking at your health and well-being for a start, because this can take over emotionally and drain you and make you ill if you're going through a legal process, particularly if it's a long, drawn-out process. And look at it as an individual who has some empathy, not only for themselves, but for the other people concerned in the background. There might be, children, there might be family members, there might be
staff,
all sorts of, and so you might be fighting the battle for them, but what is it that they really want? So you need to have all that information when you go in there and express it to the person that is there to work for you. I was going to say fight for you, but work for you to get the best outcome.
Yeah. And it comes back around again to that high emotional, low intelligence. When you are angry and just wanting to hurt others, your decision-making capacity is not great, is it?
No, absolutely not. You're not thinking straight. You're emotionally attached to something that maybe when you sit back and really look at what the issue is, it's not as big as the story you're telling yourself. And when you're emotional, the story gets bigger and bigger, and then there are other voices that come in from other parties who are telling you should do this and you should do that, and then you've got your lawyer on the other side telling you something else. And the confusion there, how do you combat that confusion and get to the nitty-gritty without prolonging?
That's right. Well, you're talking exactly what that escalation is. And it's a build up in you, and then you start talking to other people around you and they build you up and they give you advice, and then you escalate further and go to a lawyer and they position you and they build you up even more. And so what you do need to find a breaking point as to when you stop the escalation and actually deal with the dispute. If you continue the escalation, the lawyer will deal with the dispute for you, and it will end up potentially being an outcome that is not what you want. That's right. So at some point you've got to go, okay, I'm consciously not going to escalate this anymore. In fact, my friends and family are just telling me what I want to hear. How do I find a service that can help me actually resolve this? A lot of people, though, cling on to conflict because they love the emotional drama of it. But there are plenty of people who don't and don't want to be dragged in. And so those are the people that need to go, okay, let's look for the problem-solving solution here. And I mean, we were just talking as well about those who are driven by anger and retribution sometimes. But there are others that go the opposite way, and they're driven by keeping people happy. And those are the people then that will just walk away and not actually stand up for themselves at all, which is the complete opposite way. And that doesn't resolve the problem either.
It continues, even though maybe the legal side of it is finished. But when you actually get back into reality, if you haven't resolved that issue, it's going to continue and flare up.
That's
on
right.
and on, over and over, until it comes back.
And if you've walked away, you certainly haven't had the outcome that you want.
No, and that's to the dissatisfaction of you as the individual, the dissatisfaction of the people that may be affected by it as well. So there's no harmony there. So there's no resolution happened.
So the harmony comes where you've got a certain level of assertiveness because you do know what you want and you're actually not going to back down on that. But you also have some respect and empathy for the other person. You don't want to completely damage the relationship, but you also want to make sure that you're not walked all over. And so that is the harmony, and coming from conflict resolution from that place, that's got to be the style that you approach it with.
Yeah, and one thing I was thinking of when you were saying that is that when we as individuals require the legal system, we need to go within ourselves and really have a look at what's going on inside us so that we can actually then be realistic when we approach whomever we need.
That's right. Exactly. A lawyer doesn't have a magic wand.
No, they don't.
No.
This has been a fabulous conversation, and we need to continue these conversations, and we will be doing a series, Jackie, of such Facebook Lives, because I think it's a really important thing for us as a community to understand the legal system, and it's not that bad place that you go to fight a battle. It's a place you go to resolve an issue that may not be able to be resolved by the two people it's involving. So I'm looking forward to our series of conversations talking about the different parts of the legal system and how it can assist us in any way. It could be buying a home, it could be, you know, dealing with some small issues. So yeah, look, thank you so much. Now, how can they get in contact with you, Jackie?
Yeah, so there's two places. So through TBA Law, which is my main firm, or you can email me, jackie@legallywisewomen.com.au.
And Jackie is spelled JACQUI at legallylieswomen.com.au. And thank you so much. And we'll be back with another talk with Jackie soon.
Thanks.
It's bye from me now, talking all things business.